Hari Om. Let's start with the prayer. Om Samasta Jana Kalyani Niratam Karunamayam Namami Chinmayam Devam Sadgurum Brahma Vidvaram Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanora Mardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum Tvameva Mata cha Pita Tvameva Tvameva Bandhuscha Sakha Tvameva Tvameva Vidya Dravidam Tvameva Tvameva Sarvam Amadeva Deva Tvameva Sarvam Gurudeva Deva. Hari Om. We are doing Panchadashi, chapter 1, and we are discussing the sloka 13, and we'll go over it and then continue our discussion. Pratibimbosti bhatiti Pratibimbosti bhatiti Vyavahararha vastuni Vyavahararha vastuni Tannirasya viruddhasya Tasyopadana muchyate Tasyotpadana muchyate. So Tasya utpadanam uchyate. So we discussed this a little bit. Pratibimbaha asti bhati iti vyavahararhani vastuni. In the transactional world, the errors in perception occurs because of some pratibimba. Pratibimba means some obstruction is there. This can be the secondary things that are required for my perception to take place, and there is always some kind of an obstruction that makes it not possible to see that clearly. And in the example that he gave, Adhyetru Varga Madhyastha Putra Dayana Sabdavatu Bhanepi Abhanam is there. He can hear, at the same time he cannot hear. He can hear this son voice is there, at the same time he cannot distinctly hear because everybody else is chanting along with him. So here the pratibimba is other people's chanting. But the conventional example is, we know, is the rope snake, where I cannot see completely. I am seeing little bit is there is a vastu jnanam is there, vastuni is there, vastu jnanam is there. I mean, there is some object there that I know, and I know it's I know some attributes also. It's around 5 feet. It's not infinite. It's about 5 feet, and it is, when I stepped on it, it's soft to touch, and it is in the alleys, and likelihood that it may be a snake or it may be road. So the pratibimbam here is not sufficient light for me to see clearly all the attributes of the object. We just discussed that from the point of science also, it's only a reflected attributes of the object that are gathered by the senses and forms a vritti in the mind. Vritti is a thought, and the thought is illumined by the consciousness that I am, for me to be conscious of the thought and therefore conscious of the object, because contents of the thought is nothing but attributes of the object. Again, example of the hand here. Since I can see the hand because there is a light there, and the light is getting reflected, and the form of the hand stays with the hand, but only a reflected form of the hand is what one sees as an image in the retina. Even from the point of traditional explanation via Mimamsa, but these explanations are not Vedantic explanation. They are not. There is no discussion of this in the Upanishads. It's only by Mimamsa. Mimamsa means by inquiry, analysis of the statements of the Upanishad, and the Mimamsa position is because different philosophers have different positions in terms of explaining what it is, and these explanations can differ even though the truth is the same. According to Advaita, the truth is Brahma Satyam, Jagan Mithya, Jivo, Brahmaiva Naparaha. Absolute truth is Brahman, which is Satyam, is same as Nityam, because it is eternal, infinite, and so on. Second aspect, that is the first aspect. I need to know that that is the only real entity. Satyam also, that's the only real entity. All other things are apparently real. And therefore, whatever other things come under Jagat, the world, and whatever I see, whatever I perceive, and therefore it is Mithya. Mithya means it is neither real or not real. Or you can make it more sophisticated statement, ontologically it is of lower order of reality compared to the Brahman. It is apparently real as long as the apparently real is taken as really real if I don't know the truth behind it. So that's essentially what the implication is. That is Brahma Satyam, Jagan Mithya. Jivo Brahma Eva. So the fundamental truth, the third aspect is that Jiva is nothing but Brahman. So I am, Jiva is not somebody. I am nothing but Brahman. Brahman means infiniteness. So I cannot become infinite. Finite cannot become infinite. So I am already infinite. Therefore, if I am already infinite, then why am I looking for? But I am taking myself that I am a finite even though I am infinite. So I know I am the total, at the same time I do not know. So ignorance is a problem. And what is a pratibimba? We'll discuss that here. That is essentially ignorance is a pratibimba. Here the pratibimba means obstruction. When the obstruction is there, when I don't see the rope as a rope, obstruction is coming from the light is not sufficient. Therefore, when I see there is an object, I want to know what is that object, and it is 5 feet long, and this is soft to touch, and at the same time people have told me that there are a lot of snakes around here, and therefore it can be snake, it can be rope also. But I take it as a snake because when the mind does not know completely based on the information, there is a cognition. Cognition is not complete because the cognition is through your attributes, because senses are getting reflected attributes of the object. When I say it's 5 feet long, 5 feet is with the object there, but I'm only getting a reflected 5 feet information, and that form is essentially what the eyes can see, and that reflected attributes of the object is forming a vritti, and therefore the contents of the vritti is only based on that. I have to make a choice, I have to make a guesswork or recognition, and recognition is from the memory. If I don't have any memory, I will say there is an object there of 5 feet long and soft to touch, what it could be. And if I don't know, I have to ask somebody else, say, what is that object? When I see clearly it's only 5 feet and so on and so forth. Depending on further attributes and so on, I may be able to say it is something like this, something like that, called upama pramana. This looks like something, and it's not really that something, but it looks like something. So all those things are means of knowledge. So there is a cognition, a volition, cognition. Volition means perception through the senses, and information forming as a thought. Cognition is complete information, and thought is known. And that's essentially the palavyapti. That there is a result of that. And what is the result? I have to go back into the memory where the cognition has to be recognized, the cognized object has to be recognized, and the recognition is from the memory. From the memory, what is that object which has similar attributes that I am seeing? And since the attributes are incomplete, and there can be many objects that fit in, and I don't say it is an elephant because attributes don't match elephant. So attributes fit in something, a rope or a snake and so on and so forth, and I call it as a snake because I am afraid of the snake and I better be careful with it. So that is essentially pratibimba. So tan nirasya viruddhasya, because it's absence of the clear understanding, I don't see object clearly as it is because attributes are not complete, then I project something other than there it is a snake I am projecting, and that is essentially. Tasyo upadanam uchyate. So that is utpadanam. This is that born. That opposite is born in my mind. The snake is what I see there. So he is explaining this. These are called errors in perception, and errors in knowledge. Essentially, the erroneous knowledge is called Brahma, and correct knowledge is Brahma. So what is correct knowledge? How do you define correct knowledge? And the Vedanta Paribhasha is defined as the Anadigata, Abhadita, Artha Vishayaka, Jnanatvam Pramanam. That Abhadita means it is not negated later at any time, means non-negatable. That means that is so, it cannot be dismissed. Whereas in the case of a rope snake, when I have no doubt it is a snake, and because of that I am afraid, and I am running away, my heart is pumping, all real effects are coming because I feel that snake is real. So it is a Brahma from my point. Only the question comes whether it's a real or not when somebody tells it's not, there is no snake there, it's only a rope. So the question comes, only a doubt arises, because if it is a rope, then I don't have to be afraid of. All my unnecessarily samsara, fear and associated will go away if I know that it is a rope. Therefore, inquiry is required to find out whether it's a rope or a snake, because a doubt arises because of somebody else told me that it is a rope, not a snake. Because of faith in his words, since he doesn't lie, and if it is a, then why am I seeing, if it is a snake as a rope? Inquiry is required, and inquiry, I need the appropriate means of knowledge, pramana, to find out what it is. In this case, a torchlight or some light is required to investigate what the object is. So when I throw the light on it, then I see, hey, it is in fact snake with the rope only, not a snake. So what happened to the snake? Snake, from where it came, it went back. Where did it come? It came from my mind only. It's not real snake somewhere else, that is I am putting. So what was there? The snake as though is superimposed on the object there, and that snake is disappeared. That's called adhyasa, superimposed error of perception that occurs because of not having a complete information about it. So here, everything is okay, ma? The Jayanti is okay. Here the statement is that there is a cause for obstructing of the truth, and tasya hetu samanabhi. Let's chant this sloka 14. Tasya hetu samanabhiharaha, tasya hetu samanabhiharaha, putra dhvanishrutau iha anadiravidyavai avidyaiva iha anadiravidyaiva vyamohaika nibandhanam iha anadiravidyaiva iha anadihi avidya eva. So vyamohaika nibandhanam. Okay, together. Tasya hetu samana abhiharaha putra dhvanishrutau iha anadiravidyaiva vyamohaika nibandhanam. So here, what is the obstruction? Is for every error in perception, called Brahma. There has to be a nibandhanam. There is the obstruction, and obstruction is because of pratibimba. That is essentially the pratibimba is due to chanting of other people. So satya hetu samanabhiharaha putra dhvanisruto. In the case of why I am not able to pick up my son's voice because of all other people are together, samanabhiharaha, there is a simultaneous chanting of by all other people, and tasya hetuhu, that is a cause for putra dhvani sruto, in listening to my son's voice. So I could not hear properly. Bhanepi abhane. I am hearing, at the same time I am not hearing. And that is the example case. Now we go to the main one. What is the cause for why I don't know myself? Because why did you say I don't know myself? Because I know it, but at the same time I don't know it. When you say why, if you say you know it, then if you say this is a source of happiness, I am the source of supreme happiness. So I am the Atma Paranandaha Parapremaspadam Yataha. Yam Atma Paranandaha Parapremaspadam. It's 8 sloka. This Atma is Parananda Swarupam. It is of the supreme happiness, and it's Param. Therefore, it's I love that, because supreme the source of love also. So whenever something is source of happiness, I love those objects. So all objects which are source of happiness, that's what I love. So I think this gives me happiness, therefore I love it. If it gives me unhappiness, then I hate it. So likes and dislikes for all my world is based on whether that gives me happiness or not. The one that gives me happiness may not give you happiness. I like coffee, because coffee gives me happiness. You don't like coffee because you like tea, because tea gives you happiness. So all these things, whatever I say, I like this, I like this, I like this, and I'm going after the objects that I like only because that gives me happiness. But if this is a source of happiness, then we have two problems. One is, if this is the ultimate source and I love everything else only for my sake, that means there is no happiness there. Happiness is coming from myself. That means if I know that happiness is from my own self and I love myself, if you say, that means I should know myself. You know it, at the same time you don't know it. You know it enough to love yourself, but you don't know it that you are Ananda Swarupa completely, and then you are going after it. Bhanepi abhane. That means you know, you have a partial knowledge of it, not complete knowledge. That means you have some ignorance about yourself. And that's what is here in the second line. Iha means in the case of Atma, Iha anadihi avidya eva. So in this case, the ignorance which is beginningless alone is the cause. Nibandhanam is the cause for the obstruction. So we have two things. One is, it is avidya. Avidya means ignorance. Ignorance of what? Ignorance of my own self. And therefore I don't know myself what I am, and I take therefore myself what I am not as I am, because there is the niruddha opposite. I am taking it as I am, and that is due to vyamoha ekanibandhanam. So it is a delusion that arises because of the avidya. So here we are talking about the avidya and illusion and a delusion. There are three aspects involved. Avidya, it says I am having avidya. Avidya means ignorance. Ignorance, we said, is any ignorance is beginningless. Because if it has a beginning, that means I am knowledgeable before. And knowledgeable person cannot become ignorant. So any ignorance cannot have a beginning. But that ignorance can be removed by appropriate knowledge. I said appropriate. So if I have ignorance of chemistry, then ignorance of chemistry can be removed by the knowledge of chemistry. So what should I do in order to get chemistry knowledge? I have to approach appropriate teacher who knows chemistry and who can communicate that chemistry to me so that I also can understand. So he has to come to my level, and knowing what my problems are, he has to uplift mine in terms of providing the knowledge. And the knowledge cannot be willed, so I have to tune my mind in the direction that he is pointing out, or with the chemistry Saraswati has to come. Chemistry Saraswati has to come, and chemistry Saraswati does not come unless the mind is conducive for her to come. That means I have to prepare my mind sufficiently so that I can learn chemistry, and for that I had to approach a teacher who knows chemistry, number one, and who can communicate the knowledge to me so that I can also understand. People may know chemistry, but they may not be able to teach properly. So it's useless to go to that kind of teachers and ask for, please teach me chemistry. All this is implied because for any avidya, for any ignorance of any particular objects where I do not know, therefore I have to approach a teacher. If I don't know how to play tennis, and I need a teacher for that. If I don't know how to do lift weights, and otherwise I'll get hurt myself. So I need a gym teacher or one who can help me how to do exercises. So for everything I need a teacher, but for Vedanta he says I don't need a teacher. That shows the stupidity only. So for any knowledge I need an appropriate teacher, and teacher who is trained in that subject and who can teach to my level. And so he not only knows, and he also knows how to teach also. So that is the one who is the right teacher. So for chemistry, I need to go to chemistry teacher. And for physics, I have to go to physics teacher. And for astronomy, I have to go to astronomy teacher. And there is no point for me to go to a physics teacher when I want to learn chemistry. I have to use proper judgment. So for any particular knowledge, I need to know who knows that subject only. For ignorance of myself, since I don't know myself, and I need to go a teacher who can teach me, who can teach at least what is the self. So what does the teacher should know? If the teacher knows only his self, I don't want to know his self, I want to know myself. I want to know about my own nature, not about his nature. Unless the self that he knows is the self in him is same as the self in me. All this is implied. He can only teach, and I can only learn about myself by going to him, provided he knows myself. That means if he knows only himself, but himself also he should know that the self he knows is the self in all. Says that knowledge has to be implied in his, then only he can communicate to me and teach me about myself, even though he knows himself. Essentially, self that I am has to be all-pervading self. Then only it's possible. Otherwise, you cannot have it. So, iha anadir avidya eva, that alone is the cause for. It is ignorance alone is the cause for the problem, not knowing myself. And that if I don't know myself, and then what happens? Then essentially, as it says in the nirasya viruddhasya tasyopadanam uchyate. If I don't know it, mind doesn't stop there. It takes himself what I am not as I am. So the problem is, who has this knowledge? Who has the ignorance? Who need to go to a teacher? All has to be very crystal clear, because a lot of confusion in the literature and in the communications also. So who has the ignorance? Brahman doesn't have ignorance. He is all-pervading, eternal and infinite. That OC, original consciousness, does not have ignorance. So it doesn't have to realize. There is nothing to realize, because I am, period. It knows that I am, and that is one without a second, so it doesn't have ignorance also. Ignorance and the knowledge of it, because there is knowledge. Ignorance is only removed by the knowledge only for the people who are ignorant. From the point of Brahman, no need to go anywhere, and they cannot go anywhere because it is infinite already. So, from the point of original consciousness, there is no Vedanta, no Jnanam, no Ajnani, all this, even Vedanta also is not there. Because it's one without a second. From Brahman point, there is no Vedas also. So now, who has it? We remember what is the Jiva? Original consciousness is there. Then the Buddhi, the mind and the Buddhi, intellect. But the intellect is by nature is inert. It cannot know, and it doesn't have ignorance also. Chair doesn't have ignorance, or chair doesn't have a knowledge. So it is neither. I cannot go and teach a chair, you are of such swarupam and all that. Because it doesn't, there is no means of knowledge for it even to gain it. There is no ignorance or the knowledge also. It's a pure nature of inert things, so the question does not arise. So only who is ignorant? The pure consciousness. When the buddhi is there, it gets reflected, and the buddhi, because of the reflection of the consciousness called Chidabhasa, buddhi behaves as though it is a conscious entity. Because example of the moon as though became a luminous entity by just reflecting the sunlight, because luminosity is not there in the moon, but it is acquiring as though it is a luminous body in the sky by reflection process. The same thing, buddhi is as though is behaving like a conscious entity because of the reflection consciousness. So we have original consciousness, we have buddhi, and buddhi is activated by the Chidabhasa, reflected consciousness. Now that buddhi is acting like a pramata. Question is, it is acting like a pramata by borrowed consciousness only. Just as the moon is acting like a luminous body in the sky because of borrowed luminosity from the sun. So now, when the buddhi is acting, it is the buddhi that doesn't have the clear understanding. This activated buddhi, not the original buddhi. Original buddhi is inert. So activated buddhi has no clear understanding that the consciousness that I have is due to the original consciousness, which is infinite. So who has the wrong notion? The anadi, avidya. Avidya, who has the avidya? It's not the OC, it's not the original consciousness, it is the reflected consciousness in the buddhi. The buddhi with the reflected consciousness together is acting like a pramata, knower and unknower, ignorant and I know this and I don't know this. All that is at the level of buddhi. So who needs Vedanta education? It is the buddhi, and the buddhi can only learn through vrittis. So therefore, tad vijnanartam sa gurum eva abhigachet samitpanihi sotriyam brahmanishtam. So in the Mundakopanishad it says parikshalokan karmachidan brahmano nirveda mayannasya krutakrutena tad vijnanartam sa gurum eva abhigachet samitpanihi sotriyam brahmanishtam. So for that you approach a teacher with the humility, so that he doesn't have to teach, because you are not paying anything, you cannot pay anything him at all, because already he is leveling in himself and Atmani eva Atmana tushtaha. You cannot make him more happy because they are already happy. So there is no reason but by giving something he is going to give, because he is already full by himself. And therefore, if at all he does, is because of the Acharya Runa. He himself was a student before, and he went through the same process, and his teacher taught him with compassion, because teacher sees he is suffering and he needs education, and therefore he taught him the knowledge. So tadvidhi pranipatena pariprasnena seveya upadesyanti te jnanam jnanina tattvadarshanaha. So Krishna says, you approach a teacher. But what about the teacher? Teacher will teach, because that's what he is. He himself learned, therefore, for fulfilling his obligation to a teacher, that is a Vedantic obligation, Rishi Runa and also Acharya Runa. Therefore, to fulfill the obligation to his teacher, he cannot but teach when an appropriate student approaches him properly. There is one I think a Zen story. So one student want to learn. So he says, what should be the qualifications of a teacher? So he should be like this, he should be like that. So he has all tick mark, because he has a Visotriyaha, he has a Brahmanishta, all those, whatever that he gathered that one teacher of Vedanta should be. So he itemized all the things that are needed for a teacher, and he went to see what can I get that kind of teacher so that I can learn. So he went to teacher, and in every teacher he found that he has this tick mark, but he doesn't have this, so he doesn't fulfill all the criteria. So he left that one and went another. Like that he went on from one teacher to other teacher, until at start he found a teacher who has all the requirements that he has gathered that teacher should have. So he was happy. He said, now I've found a teacher. So he went to the teacher and said, I've been looking for a teacher and I have all these qualifications, and I went all over, and people only meeting few qualifications but not all, and I found you are the only one that I could find that met all the qualifications. Please, I want to learn, and you are the right teacher for me. The teacher was very happy to know that he passed all the examinations. So he said, I see. So you want to learn from me? Yes. You come here. I want to give a test for you. If you pass it, then I will teach you. So okay. So he took him there, and there was a well there, and there is a rope, and there is a bucket, and there is a big tank, small little tank with that to be filled. He says, take this the bucket and tie the rope, and water is there in the well. You take the water and fill up that small tub, and if you fill that, then you are okay. Then I will take. This is the test. Yes, that is the test. This is okay. And then he looked at the bucket. There is no bottom for the bucket. Say, how am I going to get the water out of the well and put it in the tub? There is no water. Says, sir, yeah, sir, how can I fill it up? There is no bottom for this bucket. I cannot take any water out of it in the process. Nothing will come out. Then teacher laughed. Says, don't I know that? Says, you have no faith in the teacher's words, and you have listed qualifications for the teacher, but the problem you have is you have no qualifications for a student. So first fulfill what are the requirements for the student before you go to any teacher. Don't go and judge the teacher. This man is realized, this man is not realized, and so on. In fact, you can never evaluate who has realized or not. So all the Sthita Prajna Lakshana that Krishna gives is not to evaluate somebody, hey, he is realized master, he is realized master, and he is realized master, he is not, he realized. Don't do, there is no litmus test to test anybody else other than yourself. So what is this? Say, the idea, you cannot test otherwise. So, but the scripture says, Tad Vijnanartham sa gurum eva abhigachet samit panihi sotriyam brahmanishta. Says you go to a teacher who with the attitude of service, and that teacher who is sotriya, who has learned the scriptures from his teacher, and is also who is brahmanishta, means who is abiding in the self, who has self-realized. Then if I cannot know whether I can test whether he is a sotriyam or not, when he opens his mouth and he quotes the scriptures, I know he has studied the scriptures, and when he communicates the scriptural knowledge, I can say that he knows the subject. But what about the brahmanishta? It's not, there's no objective test there. So how am I going to know whether he has realized or not? There is no litmus test there. There is no litmus test. Therefore, I cannot evaluate my teacher is Brahmanishta or not. I cannot reach anybody else that is a Brahmanishta or not. So don't go with an attitude that I am going to judge somebody whether he is realized or not. And no realized master declared that I have realized. So one fellow went to Swami Tejobayanji and asked, sir, have you met anybody who has really realized? One student asked. Swamiji says, this man is asking a question and asking if I have met somebody else who has realized. That means he already concluded that I have not realized. This is essentially, you cannot go and ask anybody you have realized or not. And of course, he is not going to go and ask anybody or realized. So how is this possible? Then scripture says you go to a teacher who is realized and who knows the Shastras. So there are the three kinds of teachers. One is one who is realized teacher and who knows this, and also who can communicate that knowledge, Sotriya and Brahmanishta. The second type of teacher who knows this Shastras completely, but he might not have realized. He might not have realized. And the third teacher is, he has realized, but he doesn't have no knowledge of the Shastras. Means he cannot communicate that knowledge. So he says, the best teacher is of course one who knows and also who has realized is the best teacher. And the second best is the one who knows the scriptures and might not have realized. And the least teacher is the one who knows, who has self-realized, but he has no way of communicating that properly to me. Just put namaskaram and go. So the correct teacher is the one who knows the Shastras. And since I cannot evaluate whether he has realized or not, so whether it's of one or two, first category or second category, I will never know. So the best thing is, assume that my teacher has realized, and if he knows the Shastras, then I can learn Shastra and I can realize in the process whether my teacher realized or not. Teacher realized or not, I will never know. But the teacher knows that he has realized or not. And the teacher who has realized, he doesn't go and do tam-tam that say, I have realized. That's one of the. So you have to approach a teacher who is that. So in the case of this example, the fellow said it, you go first become a good disciple before you go on to test the teacher whether the teacher is realized. So what should I do? He says, you prepare your mind and a proper teacher will come to you. When it comes, make sure you are available. So the Gurudev Swami Chinmayana used to say that like a flower, bloom yourself. Don't go in search of a bee, where the bee is. When you bloom yourself wherever you are, appropriate bee shall come. That's the law. Appropriate teacher will come. That's the law. And my own example, I rejected all the books because of the confusion, and I said no more Swamis, no more this one. I was concentrating in the science only, publish or perish criteria there. So I was concentrating mostly on science, and Swami Chinmayana suddenly came to Washington area to give yajna, and we ended up seeing this by accidentally, and my wife insisted that we should go since we don't have anything else. Therefore I went and then found my teacher. So how a teacher comes into picture is almost a wonder, and therefore I was not looking for a teacher, but appropriate teacher came. But when the teacher came, I was able to recognize that he is my teacher, because the very next day I was there for the Upanishad class, driving around an hour distance away from the place, because I was so much impressed by the first lock and the logic of it. And logic I cannot dismiss easily. So even though I was like an agnostic, I cannot dismiss the power of the logic. I had to know what exactly is this, because that makes more sense to me. In fact, I wrote a big letter to Gurudev, and after the yajna, assuming that he may not respond, and pages of pages, I say, what is the use of this knowledge, what's the use of that, when people are in India are all poor and suffering, education is more important. We have to do something. First we have to uplift the society with education, then you can teach this kind of things, may be helpful and all. I thought he won't reply, and he sent back a letter to me saying that you come and meet me in Pittsburgh. But it so happened my wife also had an occasion. We went for a week to Pittsburgh. There he said, since you are interested in helping, you be in charge. We form an organization and you be in charge. So that's why if you complain too much, you give work to him so that he won't complain anymore. That's what I learned from Gurudev. So that's how Seva Incorporated formed. I was a secretary treasurer for many years, until now it's replaced by CORD now. But anyway, he says, Tasya hetu samana biharaha putra adhvani srutil iha anadira vidya eva vyamohaika nibandhanam. It causes a delusion, vyamoha, this it's a moha itself is the delusion, and the special delusion is you don't know about yourself, not delusion of everything else. You don't know about yourself. Therefore, since I don't know myself, I take myself what I am not as I am. So that is called moha. Moha means taking myself what I am not as I am and operating in that. So what do I take myself as? So this the ignorance is, we're discussing, it's in the intellect. Intellect, not just the intellect, activated intellect. Activated because of the original consciousness. As long as intellect is there, activation will be there, whether I like it or not. Because the intellect has the capacity to reflect. And reflection occurs as long as the intellect is there and the original is there. Original consciousness is always there. So a reflection always will be there as long as buddhi is there. But the reflection itself is not a problem. Activation of a buddhi as a chaitanyam is not a problem. But if the activated buddhi doesn't know that the consciousness that I am is due to the original consciousness, and takes itself as I am self-conscious entity, I am the one who is knowing myself, I am a conscious entity, and this is unconscious entity, and he is a conscious entity. Like that, if I try to differentiate myself from the original consciousness, taking myself as a localized consciousness, why? Because I do not know that I am the original consciousness. That, when did I not know? That is avidya, and that is a beginningless. Therefore, I take myself, I am the buddhi, and from then on, from buddhi to mind, and from buddhi to mind to the body, I take myself, I am a jiva. Jiva means localized conscious entity. Localized consciousness, consciousness is not localized. Consciousness as though localized due to the reflection. And the reflection consciousness having a notion that I am an ignorant person, I do not know myself, and that is in the buddhi itself, in the intellect. Therefore, the knowledge has to be gained by the intellect. Intellect can know only through vritti, by the thought process. Therefore, tad vijnanartam sa gurumeva abhigacches Samitpani Sotriyam Brahmanishtam. Go to a teacher and ask for appropriate questions to learn who you are. That knowledge has to be remove the ignorance in the buddhi. And that opposite, it's not a chemistry knowledge, it's not a physics knowledge for me to go, it is the self-knowledge. So I have to go to a person who knows the self-knowledge and gain the knowledge through Sravanam, Mananam and Nididhyasanam. That's what scripture says. Srotavyaha, Mantavyaha, Nididhyasitavyaha. So that's why tad vidhi. So in order to know it, I had to know. So tad vijnanartham, to gain the knowledge, I had to approach something. I had to approach a teacher who can teach me. Teaching is only from the buddhi of the teacher to the buddhi of the student. It's only communication, provided there is a language between them that they can understand. If the teacher knows English and student doesn't know English, or if the teacher knows only Sanskrit and student doesn't know Sanskrit, no communication possible. All that is implied. Therefore, who has the ignorance? Not the original consciousness, not the buddhi, it is the activated buddhi, and that requires, therefore, it is not getting rid of buddhi. Says you destroy the buddhi in order to realize, nothing will happen. You destroy every day when you go to this deep state. So it's not the destruction of the mind, it is only by the mind, because and through the mind and to the mind only. And it will go more detail as becomes clear. So it is the reflecting medium along with the reflected consciousness, and reflected consciousness cannot be there unless there is original consciousness. But the ignorance is in the buddhi, and therefore realization is in the buddhi. Therefore, when Tom realizes, Dick doesn't realize, because even though it's nothing to do with the original consciousness, it's a localized buddhi that has the notions, and it's a localized buddhi that gaining the knowledge. All that is to be understood. And with that, we go into the more details in the next sloka, that is 15. We'll do that afterwards. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om. Sri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.